Hi. Uh, Welcome, everyone. My name is Oscar Villalon. I'm the managing editor of ZYZZYVA, a literary journal based out here in San Francisco, celebrating its 35th anniversary. It is my privilege to be in conversation with our featured author, Kirstin Valdez Quade, about her new novel, Five Wounds. A little bit about Kirstin. She is the author of the story collection Night at the Fiestas, which was winner of the National Book Critics Circle's John Leonard Prize. She's the recipient of a 5 Under 35 award from the National Book Foundation, and she teaches at Princeton University. Also, too, quickly, a little piece of housekeeping. As with all the books by all the authors at the San Antonio Book Festival, you can get your copy from Nowhere Books, the official bookseller for the festival. Also, Quade's publisher and the San Antonio Book Festival are offering a pair of hand earrings that mimic the cover art from the novel. So for a chance of getting those earrings, you can get your copy of the book from Nowhere Bookshop. The winner will be, and I've been assured of this, will be chosen randomly by Nowhere staff. So everyone's got a fair shot at getting the beautiful pair of earrings. Before we get into our conversation, I thought I would talk a little bit about the novel just to give us some context. It is the story of a family, the Padilla family. It is set during Holy Week in Las Penas, New Mexico. The time is sometime in the Obama administration, and it is a look at what happens between a passion processional in which Amadeo Padilla, 33 years old, volunteers to be the penitente. He's going to be the Christ in this passion processional. And in the course of this processional, asks to have real nails driven into his palms. The time this happens, his 15-year-old daughter, Angel, arrives at his home. She's pretty much been raised alone by her mother, Marissa, and she's left her home for reasons that'll be disclosed later in the book, to be with her father, very, very pregnant, a few weeks away from giving birth. What the novel then traces is what happens between the time of this crucifixion and the birth of the child, a boy named Connor, and 1 year out. So we go from Holy Week to then, I believe, towards the end of it, a year and a half later, so towards Easter again, if I recall correctly. In that course of that time, we get to know Amadeo, Angel, her mother Marissa, Yolanda, who is the matriarch of the family, a grandmother at the tender age of 55. And we also get to know the other people in their lives, in their orbits, in this town of Las Penas. It is an absolutely wonderful novel. It is a novel that is incredibly funny. It is a very funny book, yet it is not a humorous novel. The humor, as when you read the book, you'll see stems from the characters themselves, who are humorous people, have a sense of humor amid incredibly trying circumstances. It is one of the best books I've read this year so far. It is also a book that mirrors to us or shows us the American experience, but it's centered in a Mexican-American family. It is, however, for all its specificity and for all its wonderful observation about the Mexican-American experience, I think a universal story, a story that many, many people, millions of Americans, honestly, will be able to relate to on some level. So with that, Kirstin, may I ask you to read a little bit from your wonderful book?
Sure. Well, thank you so much. It's just really wonderful to be here and to be talking to you, Oscar. Thank you for that introduction. So I'll read a scene it's toward the beginning of the novel. This is Easter dinner, and the family is gathering after Amadeo has asked for the nails. And his daughter, Angel, by the way, is not pleased that he did this. Amadeo's sister apparently doesn't notice that he isn't speaking to her and hasn't since her obnoxious gift last Christmas. When Valerie comes in, she hugs him before he can dodge. Still gripping his arm, she steps back and pancakes. He almost can't look at her. The absurdly long hair hanging loose, the oversized earrings, the ambiguously ethnic scarf, and that superior forbearing expression, as if she's willing to humor him, but only up to a point. Good to see you, little brother. Amadeo nods coolly, but she misses it, because she's already turned to Angel. Oh my God, Angelica, let me see you. You're enormous. Angel ducks her head, pleased and a little shy. Hey, Aunt Val. Valerie hugs her, then crosses to the living room to switch off the television. 2 years ago, Valerie got rid of her TV. If she's not making a big show of ignorance whenever someone mentions The Bachelor or a piece of celebrity gossip, then she's going on about some project one of the girls has done with the endless stores of time and intellect and creativity endemic to television-free households. I don't know how you guys can hear yourselves think with that thing going all the time, she says, dusting off her hands. Armed with a brand new master's degree, Valerie is now a counselor in the Albuquerque public school system and is therefore an expert on everything. She took night and weekend classes for 3 years, and for 3 years she swanned around, sighing and rubbing her temples. She tosses around theories and diagnoses, pressing her lips. She says, nodding knowingly. She has the maddening tendency to read into even the most banal comments. If, for example, Amadeo says that he wanted to kill the lady with the 600 coupons in front of him at the checkout, Valerie's eyebrows will pinch in concern. Amadeo's theory, and God knows he's no school counselor, is that Valerie never got over his birth, which means she spent all but 5 years of her life resentful. Only 3 things make Valerie bearable. First, she's gotten fat and she's self-conscious about it. Second, she was hit by her ex-husband, which makes her skittish around any displays of masculine strength, so Amadeo need only flex his fist or massage a bicep to disconcert her. Third, her kids are pretty cute. Or they used to be. Now that she's 12, Lily acts just as superior as her mom. She reads far beyond her grade level, no surprise, given her glasses and frizzy mop of hair. She and her little sister are still standing in the doorway, the screen propped against their bottoms, staring solemnly at his beer and his bandaged hands, as if they're afraid to step all the way into the house with Amadeo there. Uncle Amadeo, erratic, mean drunk. He can imagine what Valerie tells them. Watch out for Uncle Amadeo. Never get in a car with Uncle Amadeo. Whatever you do, don't end up like Uncle Amadeo. Before he can help himself, he's making a nasty face at them. Rah, he snarls, raspy and sudden. Lily flinches, then regains her composure and rolls her eyes behind her glasses. But Sarah, the 7-year-old, breaks into a delighted gap-toothed laugh. She's an adorable child, large-eyed with a sweet black bob. Amadeo grins back, his irritation transformed into affection for this niece who is, it seems, still too young to despise him. Hitas, get in here, cries Yolanda, and they rush their grandmother, the screen thwacking. Angel grins at her cousins. Holy crap, you guys are big. Man, says Amadeo, slouching against the wall. It's not easy to grip his beer around his bandage, but he's managing. Today really took it out of me. They got me on painkillers and everything. He holds up his hands, but no one sees. His performance wasn't just a performance, but a true crucifixion. How many people can say they've done that for God? Maybe his hands are infected. In fact, they probably are. He unwraps the left bandage, which is moist and smelly. That is disgusting, Angel says. Don't do that crap in front of us. How'd it go on Friday, Dodo? Valerie calls. Oh, it went just great, says Angel aggressively. Ask him how his hands are. I heard, says Valerie. Unbelievable. Yolanda glances at Lily and Sarah and says with guarded cheer, we don't need to talk about this now. How's girls' school? How's school, girls? His mother might have slapped him. Are you ashamed of me? Of course not, honey, but blood and whatnot, not at dinner. I'm an atheist, brays Lily. I believe Jesus was a person, but that other stuff just got made up. Oh, says Yolanda mildly, let's not talk like that either. My question is, what's the point, Angel says. Life doesn't suck enough. Amadeo's hands, thick in their bandages, don't fit in his pockets. He can't think what to do with them. He wishes his uncle were here to explain. They take it seriously coming from Tío Tive. His mother's proud of her uncle's role in the tradition. In Tío Tive, it's noble, authentic. Somehow, in their eyes, his participation tarnishes the tradition, degrades it from the romance of sepia to garish cereal box color, from true religious conviction to pathology. I thought you were glad. Oh, Hito, I'm very proud of you. It's cool you're keeping the tradition alive. I mean, it's our family history, says Valerie, and community is great. She eyes his bandages. Just maybe don't go overboard. Do you have to do physical therapy or anything? She settles herself into an armchair, tugging the fabric at her boobs. I don't know. I could never believe in a God who wanted me to hurt myself. God doesn't want it, Amadeo longs to explain. It's something you want to do for God if you care enough. He'd like to argue with Valerie, but knows that she, with her college degrees and intro religious studies classes, can out-argue him. No one's telling you to believe nothing, he says. A familiar sense of drowning helplessness fills him, and he kicks a stack of catalogs waiting to be recycled. They slide smoothly across the carpet. For Christmas, Valerie gave Amadeo a hardback book called Mastering Aries, Breaking Free from the Prison of Male Rage. This is why he isn't speaking to her. The author is very well regarded, Valerie told him primly, as he sat there turning the thing in his hand. Thanks to that book, Amadeo has discovered new depths of male rage. He will never forgive his sister ever. Yeah, that's not a great present, his mother conceded when Amadeo cornered her in the kitchen. Amadeo had, for a moment, felt vindicated until she paused, hands motionless in the dishwasher, and ventured, "It's maybe worth thinking about, though." I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirstin. That passage that you read, I think, encapsulates so much of what the book is about, not only in terms of what are going to be its themes, but also sort of the socioeconomic world in which the Padillas find themselves. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about Las Penas and its community, because it is, as described in the novel, a place of great beauty. It's rural. There's wonderful passages describing what, the taste of the weather when snow is about to come, of what it looks like driving these winding roads at night. But it's also an underserved community.
Yes, I mean, New Mexico has, it's gorgeous. I mean, New Mexico has been written about and painted and photographed, and it's drawn artists to it for over a century, and longer. People are very attached to it. Tourists are very attached to it, and there's extraordinary disparity in wealth. I mean, in around Santa Fe and Taos, there's just extraordinary wealth, and then there's also serious poverty. The public schools need funding. It's there's a lot of suffering. Las Penas is based loosely on the villages my grandparents grew up in, and I remember driving to those villages with my grandparents. I mean, it's one of the things that I'm very close to them, and it's one of the things we do when we spend time together. And so many people have left. The buildings are crumbling. They're villages that were so vibrant in the early part of the 20th century, and then so many people left and went to cities to seek economic possibilities and jobs, and I think World War II changed a lot of these populations too, because it drew people out of the villages, and but there are still people who live there. There's still life happening, and yeah.
And within that, there's within the sort of disparity, there are people doing their best to make it. I think one of the things that's fascinating to me about the book is how you show all these different, if you will, the varieties of the Mexican American experience. Amadeo is 33. He's a grandfather. He just cannot hold a job. There's reasons for that, but he just can't do it. Angel is a teen mother. Yolanda is an administrative assistant who drives an hour to go to the state capitol where she works, and is essentially the person keeping her immediate family afloat. Valerie is a professional. She has her master's degree. All in one group, all of them sharing if you will, inhabiting the same space, the same life. And what makes it especially all ring so true is the details. This is, I thought, a wonderful, wonderful novel. It's an excellent example of what's called the realist novel. But those novels only work if the observations are exquisite, which they are here. And one of my favorite settings in this entire book are all the interactions that occur at the Smart Starts. Which could you talk a little bit about what Smart Starts is in this novel?
Yeah, so Smart Starts is the teen parenting program that Angel attends, and it's grant funded, and it's located in Espanola, and it's a GED, high school equivalency program, and also there's parent education. The girls are learning about child development and how to discipline their children in a nurturing way, and how to promote their early literacy. So yeah, it's an example of a social service program that is established in this community that really needs it. There's a need. There are these girls who this is what's going to help them graduate from high school. And it's also got its limitations.
You kept. I'm sorry. I was going to say you captured this also beautifully. When the reader is in these sections, I mean, we feel as if though we're there. We see everything. We learn about the programs, the workbooks, the interactions among all the teen mothers or teen mothers to be are rendered in such a way that I kept thinking, well, I wonder how much research went into that. How much research went into getting all those details right?
In some ways, writing the Smart Starts program was so much fun for me because I got to design a program that I thought could really work. I worked in my 20s, I worked as a grant writer for a consortium of nonprofits in Tucson that were dedicated to raising the quality of daycare and early childhood education across the city. And, especially for working poor families who depended so much on daycares. And, but it's the childcare situation in our country is disastrous. We pay childcare workers so little, and often they are working parents, usually mothers. And, working families often have to work, multiple jobs in order to cover childcare in order to work. And and sometimes what it means is that children are in programs that are, they're not learning. Their development is not being supported. And, the cost of that is terrible for our culture. It's terrible for the individual children, of course, but we know what works. So it's an issue that I feel really strongly about. I feel strongly that parents, and especially young parents, should be supported and should be able to finish their schooling and pursue their jobs. So it was fun for me to write about this program, and I used I definitely called on some of the research that I did as a grant writer. When I was a grant writer, I did a site visit to a teen parent program in Tucson. My mother is a therapist and worked with teen parent groups. And I remember when I was in high school reading one of the curriculum binders and seeing the kinds of things that kids my age were learning, and being so struck by just the tremendous responsibility that kids my very age had to carry.
Yeah, those sections also, they resonate too with what's going on with the rest of the characters. So for example, in the scene you just read, when Amadeo's sister gives him that book, yes, he absolutely. We will find out later in the novel. He's a misogynist. There is that in him. But it also becomes sort of clear that maybe just reading a book is not going to be enough to solve this. And there's some of that too in the Smart Starts, where we're starting to think, but what is it that these young women really need? What is it that's actually going to help them? And that, I think, seems to be, I think, part of what this whole novel is about. It's about this idea, and I emailed this to you earlier just to see what you thought about, but about innocence. There's these characters. Well, let's look at Amadeo and let's look at Angel. Angel, even though she is a teen mother, even though she's what we would call sex positive and all these sort of things, when you see her among her peers in her group, you still realize that they are innocent. That in spite of these things, I mean, you don't know what you don't know. They think you're worldly, but you're not. You really are going to be facing crises and making decisions, which, ready or not, you're going to have to confront. And similarly with Amadeo, there's a concept there, I thought, where because of things that have happened to him, as we'll learn in the novel, from his childhood and traumas, his mother, Yolanda, has, I think, out of a sense of guilt, done her utmost to support him, but to the point where he's not really dealing with consequences and how he's going to face them, and therefore is maintained a state of innocence in which he can't really afford to be in, not when you're 33. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love that you frame it as innocence. I was so interested in that, and I hadn't thought about it as in those terms exactly, but I think you're exactly right. Yeah, Amadeo's innocence is comes at the cost of of everybody else in his family. I mean, everybody else is bearing those costs, and he yeah, I think maybe another word for it is, just giant baby. And um, he's, but he has been allowed to be the center of his own story and to only consider his own story. And you're right, you don't get to do that when you're 33 and you've got a teenage child and there's a new baby. I mean, that's that's his arc, is learning to see the stories of the people around him, and learning that that's where healing and salvation is for him. And oh
no, please go ahead.
Well, I think Angel too, like in some way, she's grown up so quickly. From a very early age, she is her mother's best friend and companion, and she's shouldered a lot of responsibility. And of course, now that this new baby, she's taken on this extraordinary lifelong responsibility, or at least 18 years long, but let's face it, probably lifelong. And she's sexually active, and so in some ways she's not innocent, but she really is. I mean, she's learning what it means to be a parent. She's learning really what it means to be a daughter, a child, and learning how to advocate for her own needs and insist that these parents who have not really done such a great job of being there for her, insisting that they do give her the care she needs, and part of her arc is understanding that she's deserving of that care.
Absolutely. As I said before, the book is very, very funny, but it is also wrenching. There are many, and I think this is a credit to you, Kirstin, and we come to care so much about these very flawed characters that when certain things happen in the novel, we feel mortification. We feel blasted, just as they do. And one of the things that struck me is how two of the characters, going back to Amadeo, but also this wonderful character, Lisette, who is sort of, I guess you call it the queen bee of Smart Starts. Everyone wants to be around her. She is a very charismatic, to use a description, I think Amadeo calls her heavy-set girl, beautiful green eyes, but just radiates the sort of personality where people want to be around her. And one of the wrenching things about Lisette and one of the wrenching things about Amadeo is that there are points in the novel where you realize they can never express what it is they really want, what would make them happy, without doing so in a way that mocks themselves, that isn't full of self-loathing, if it isn't full of contempt. Is that something that just developed in the course of writing the book, or was that an idea you already had in mind in terms of how these characters would think of themselves?
No, it wasn't an idea that it wasn't something I put in consciously. Lisette, I love the character of Lisette. Lisette is Angel falls in love with Lisette at Smart Starts, and Angel begins to take her own desires seriously, and Lisette has suffered serious traumas, and Lisette has been let down by all of the adults around her. And so I think, Lisette has a long life experience of not being able to express what she needs in a real way and have those needs met. I mean, I think she's incredibly self-protective, and she needs to be. And part of that self-protectiveness emerges as her not being able to accept love, to accept Angel's love, yeah.
And she's rendered so powerfully too, I think, because the novel is told in the third person, and we get the various points of views of some of the characters, but not all of them. And we do not get that POV from Lisette, and I think it works wonderfully because we are forced to rely on Angel's perceptions of her to suss out, how can I help, if I can help at all, this person I love. Mm-hmm. And we are indeed in that place. It's sort of, I think, I found an act of authorial restraint that is so wise, that there is a certain amount of damage that maybe I don't know how to get inside that person's head to express it, but I can certainly observe it and relate what that might look like from the outside.
Yeah, and I think it's Lisette is such an important part of the story. But I never actually considered having Lisette be a point of view character, because it didn't quite seem like the story was hers. I mean, she's absolutely important to it, and deeply important to Angel. Yeah, and I think the question that I was interested was how does Angel, who has, she's 16 years old, there's only so much she can do, but how does this kid try to save another person, and take responsibility? Angel takes a lot of responsibility for a lot of people.
She does indeed, and as does Yolanda. The novel is not called Five Wounds for nothing. So at the time, reading it, one reminds oneself that there is a sort of, I think, a spiritual component to all this. And Yolanda is almost like a Christ-like figure. She is the closest thing I have to someone who is absolutely self-sacrificing, who only thinks of others to a fault. She never really thinks of herself and thinks of what might be good for her. And I was wondering, if you could talk about that too, because I think one of the things about it that I found so wonderful is that, particularly in certainly not just in Mexican American families, in a lot of families, but we revere our grandmothers, we revere our mothers, but we revere them almost to the point where we don't see them as people. We rather they just be saints who put their lives on hold to make sure that we're okay.
I mean, I definitely grew up in a matriarchy. The people in charge were my great grandmother, my mother, my aunt. So it was very natural for me to have Yolanda at the helm and keeping everything together. I do think, as it's not a spoiler to say that Yolanda finds out for the beginning of the novel that she is dying, and she has to figure out how she's going to approach this as somebody who has held the family together and sees the need in her son and her daughter and her granddaughter, how she's going to leave them. And as she is dealing with her illness, part of what she does is start thinking about her own life and thinking about herself more and her own needs. She chooses not to tell them that she's sick, and she sees that as selfish, and she still does it because she wants to keep that to herself for now.
And I think this becomes sort of the driving engine of the novel. I was on tenterhooks for the last 50 or so pages thinking, are they going to be okay? Are they going to be okay? Because it's not clear. And there's this, if you don't mind, I wanted to read to you one of the passages that I thought just cut deep into the heart of the matter, because amongst all these other things that the book is, it is a deep meditation on mortality, on the fact that tomorrow is promised to no person. You write, Amadeo scans them all with alarm. His suddenly frail mother, her full gray hair at the roots, his daughter, whose bright features have become puffy and pale, his rickety uncle, his sister slumped on the floor, her ridiculous woven scarf hanging from her stooped shoulders, even his nieces, homely and intelligent and socially deficient enough to eventually find success in tech or academia, seem doomed. Connor, the newest and theoretically least doomed among them, can't even hold his own head up. Since when did everyone around him become so fragile? Is it, upon this realization, is this where wisdom begins? Is this where necessary empathy will flow?
I think so. I think that's a moment when Amadeo starts looking at the people around him and begins to understand that they have stories that are unfolding that maybe don't involve him as a central character.
The reader really does feel that deeply. I think when you read this novel, you begin to understand things change. In fact, all life is change. Things might get worse. They could get better, but they might get worse. And that all the love you have for someone, no matter how you express it, is not going to be enough to safeguard what might be the inevitable, which is death, but other things as well. That, this it is necessary, I think, somehow for us to keep in the fore of our minds that, we are fragile, and that indeed looking out for as you say, looking out for one each other is the beginning of something that looks like a decent life. I wanted to get back to Amadeo really quick because there's startling moments of flashes of his misogyny throughout the book. And I wanted to ask you, how how difficult was that to write? Because when they happen, I feel, the reader feels stung because you do care about Amadeo. You understand him as a human being, and there's warmth towards him. But when these things happen, you do suck in your breath and go like, it's one of these sort of moments. But I was wondering how you approached writing those scenes.
Yeah, I mean, it's never comfortable. Like in the section I read aloud when he's talking about his sister, and he comments on her body. He says that, because she'd been in this abusive marriage, she flinches when she sees,
Yes.
masculine strength, and he uses that against her. Yeah, I mean, he can be pretty awful. I think sometimes Amadeo was definitely the trickiest character for me because he behaved in ways that I not only disagree with, but I disapprove of strongly. And I especially in the beginning, I really, really judged him in a way that they got in the way of my empathy for him. And, to be in a character's point of view, you really, as the writer, you cannot be writing from a point of judgment. It's just not going to work. So I had to get beyond that. And that was a challenge for me, an empathetic challenge. Yeah, but the fact is that I do love him, and I do, even though he behaves horribly, and I do not excuse his behavior. It's wrong, and he's called on it by certainly by his daughter, and he comes to understand that he needs to change. But I love people in my life who don't behave well. I think we none of us behaves well all the time.
Yeah, I think in the way you rendered him, misogyny comes off, or not comes off, but you could see it more as an affliction, as a pathology, that this is not disconnected from other things going on around him. This is not disconnected, which is not to say it's entirely caused by, but there is a connection between not being able to get a job, between feeling abandoned in the literal sense by the loss of his father when he's just 5, but also from just sense that you don't matter, that nothing really matters. Again, that idea of just there's no growth, there's no engagement with anything beyond your circumscribed world. And I think that's, this goes back to that scene where she gives him the book. And, what you're thinking later on is, well, what he really needs is therapy. He needs to go talk to someone, because this also might be a mental health issue.
Yeah, and maybe maybe by the end, Amadeo has changed into a character who might go seek therapy. Certainly not at that point in the novel, but yeah, he could use it. But he looks elsewhere. He looks to the community of this brotherhood of penitentes, and it in this brotherhood he sees other examples of how to be a father and how to be a son. I think what makes me love Amadeo, despite all of his weaknesses in character, is that he wants to change, and he keeps trying. I mean, from the opening pages, he's trying to change and become better, and that I'm always going to love a character that's trying, and he does get there eventually.
Even though he is one of, he's a protagonist in the novel, this really is, to me, a novel about women, or that's to say, the women in the family and in that community. there's no question that people like Yolanda are keeping this family going. There's no question that someone like Angel, the future really is going to depend on what happens to angels, and and what their lot is going to look like. And then there's also Valerie, who I found to be wonderful. The reason I find, because she is almost like the fish out of water. She is the one who has, quote unquote, made it. But as we can tell throughout the novel, even though you have, quote unquote, made it, she is still harried. It is still a very rough road she's navigating. I wonder if you could talk about that character so much, because I think, for a lot of us who, get our degrees and leave our, our neighborhoods, we may see some bit of ourselves in Valerie.
Yeah, I mean, poor Valerie. She has worked so hard to go to school and get a job and to be a success. She's doing all the right things. And I think there's a certain amount of shame about where she came from, and she feels impatient with her mother and her brother. She's I think really hurt and impatient by the closeness between Yolanda and Amadeo. I think she feels excluded by it, and she didn't get all the parenting she needed from her mother, because she was more self-sufficient. And she was more self-sufficient because she had to be, because she wasn't always getting the parenting she needed. So I think she has some resentment, and she's also a really good mom to her daughters, and she's a model for Angel, and so she's both of these things. I love Valerie.
And I love how she how much Las Penas still means to her. I think that's one of the things, too, that I found so interesting about her character, is that she straddles really these two worlds, whatever, I guess, let's call it the Anglo middle class, but also where she's from, and that there's also that sort of sense, of course, of, where does one belong? Because much of also, I think, of the novel is that, too. It's like, what is my place in this life? Where am I supposed to be?
Yeah. And, this tension between, is who I am and the place I'm supposed to be the family I come from, the world I'm born into? Is it the life I create? Is it a combination of those two? And how do you reconcile them?
I just want to say there's other things I wanted to get into, but I'm so afraid of the spoilers. There's so much that happens in this novel. I think moments where I would call holy moly moments, where things are revealed and actions are taken. But I wanted to be sure to tell you before our conversation was over, that I'm not a big crier in literature. I'm not a big crier at all. But this one did move me to tears. I think not necessarily just because of sadness, but because something I think that you do, that very few novels do, an elicitation of hope, where really what the payoff is for this novel is, can someone, if you will, catch a break? Can we finally have, I forget who the novelist was who said it, or the artist, it's not about happy endings, it's about happy moments. Can you have a happy moment for your characters in your life? Just moments where things feel like you've stepped into a state of grace. And Kirstin, I think your novel does that. It does deliver that to the reader, and I think that makes it a special experience.
Gosh, thank you so much, Oscar. There's nothing you could say that would make me happier.
I could say you want $1 million. That'd be a close second.
Close second.
Absolutely. Again, to the audience, I urge you to do yourself a favor. Please get a copy of this book. It's wonderful. I think we barely scratched the surface. To be honest with you, it's the sort of thing the one could write, you know, several thousand words about for the New York Review of Books to really dig into all the themes, to dig into all the characters and the complexity of this novel. It is also, and I don't mean to diminish this by saying it is the sort of thing that Netflix, you really should acquire this. It would be a phenomenal miniseries. Well, Kirstin, I think we've reached our time. Thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you so much for the novel. Thank you to the San Antonio Book Festival. And again, please go to the link. I guess it'll take you to Nowhere Books, where you can get a copy of 5 Wounds. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Oscar.
Oh, you're most welcome.